Have you ever noticed that the loudest people are rarely the most feared? The people who truly unsettle toxic individuals are often the quiet ones. They don't argue, they don't chase, they don't seek revenge. Yet somehow their silence creates a pressure that manipulative people cannot bear. Today, I will share 7 silent behaviors that instantly change the balance of power. These are not tricks to control others, they are disciplines that make you impossible to manipulate. Because when your mind becomes still, toxic people lose the only weapon they ever had, your reaction. Think about the last time someone tried to provoke you. Perhaps it was with a sarcastic remark, an unnecessary criticism, a disrespectful message, or an accusation that twisted the truth. What happened inside you? Before you even spoke, your heart may have raced, your breathing changed, and your mind began searching for the perfect response. This is exactly the battlefield where toxic people operate. They understand that if they can control your emotions, they can control your decisions. They do not always need to win an argument. They only need you to lose your inner balance. That is why your greatest strength is not found in having the cleverest reply. It is found in creating space between what happens to you and how you choose to respond. Most people believe silence is weakness because they mistake silence for surrender. But there is a silence that is born from fear, and there is another silence that comes from complete mastery. The first avoids conflict because it feels powerless. The second refuses unnecessary conflict because it no longer needs to prove anything. When someone insults you and you immediately react, they have already influenced your mind. Your emotions are no longer your own. They belong to whoever learned how to provoke them. Imagine becoming a puppet whose strings are pulled by every opinion, every insult, and every act of disrespect. That is an exhausting way to live. Every day becomes another emotional emergency, another opportunity for someone else to decide whether you experience peace or anger. Instead, practice the discipline of the pause, not because you have nothing to say, but because you value clarity more than speed. A few seconds of silence can prevent years of regret. In those quiet moments, ask yourself a simple question. Is this response coming from wisdom, or is it coming from wounded pride? Most of the time, you will discover that your first reaction is not your highest self speaking. It is merely your ego demanding immediate satisfaction. Toxic people become deeply uncomfortable when they cannot predict your reaction. They expect anger. They expect endless explanations. They expect you to defend yourself until you become emotionally exhausted. But when you remain composed, something unexpected happens. They lose certainty. Their usual methods begin to fail because they depend on emotional chaos, and you are no longer providing it. This does not mean you become passive. Silence is not the absence of action. It is the preparation for right action. Sometimes your response will be firm. Sometimes you will walk away. Sometimes you will establish a boundary that changes the relationship forever. But whatever you choose, let it arise from a peaceful mind rather than an agitated one. A calm decision is almost always more powerful than an emotional reaction. There is another hidden gift in this practice. Every time you resist the urge to react immediately, you strengthen your own character. Discipline is built one moment at a time. Just as a tree grows stronger by resisting the wind, your mind becomes stronger every time it refuses to be carried away by emotion. Eventually, what once triggered you begins to lose its power. The words are the same, the people are the same, but you are no longer the same. Remember, people can only manipulate the parts of you that remain unconscious. The moment you become aware of your reactions, you begin reclaiming your freedom. No one can steal your peace unless you hand it to them. Protect it carefully, because inner peace is worth far more than winning an argument. The person who controls the pause controls the outcome. Once you learn to master the pause between provocation and response, another habit begins to fall away naturally. You stop feeling the constant need to explain yourself. This is one of the quietest transformations a person can experience, yet it is one of the most powerful. There comes a moment in your life when you realize that not every misunderstanding deserves clarification, and not every accusation deserves a defense. Many people spend years trying to be understood by those who have already decided not to understand them. They carefully choose their words, explain their intentions, repeat themselves from different angles, hoping that if they are patient enough, kind enough, or logical enough, the other person will finally see the truth. But toxic people are not searching for truth. They are searching for leverage. They do not listen so they can understand you. They listen so they can find your weaknesses, your doubts, and your emotional attachments. Every explanation explanation you offer becomes another opportunity for manipulation. They twist your words, they take one sentence out of context, they pretend not to understand something that was perfectly clear, then you explain again. Soon you are trapped in an endless cycle where your energy is being consumed while nothing is actually changing. This is not communication, it is emotional exhaustion disguised as conversation. Wisdom teaches you to recognize the difference between someone who is confused and someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. The first deserves patience, the second deserves distance. If a person genuinely wants clarity, even imperfect words can build understanding. But if someone has already made you the villain in the story they tell themselves, no amount of explanation will rewrite that story. They are protecting an image that serves their own ego, and your truth threatens it. This is why quiet confidence is so unsettling to manipulative people. They expect you to chase their approval. They expect long messages defending your actions. They expect endless debates about who was right and who was wrong. Instead, you simply remain steady. You know your intentions. You know your values. You know what truly happened. That inner certainty becomes enough. You no longer need everyone else to agree with your reality before you can live peacefully within it. Notice how much suffering comes from wanting to control other people's opinions. We cannot. Every person sees the world through the lens of their own experiences, fears, and expectations. Two people can witness the exact same event and walk away with completely different stories. If you dedicate your life to correcting every false opinion about yourself, you will never have time to become the person you are meant to become. This does not mean becoming cold or arrogant. Humility still allows you to admit mistakes when they are real. If you have caused harm, apologize sincerely and correct your actions. But once your responsibility ends, do not carry the burden of managing another person's interpretation forever. There is a great difference between taking responsibility and taking ownership of someone else's unwillingness to see clearly. The strongest people speak with simplicity. They say what needs to be said once, honestly and respectfully. After that, they let their actions continue the conversation. Character will always outlast arguments. Integrity does not become stronger because it is explained repeatedly. It becomes stronger because it is lived consistently. As you stop explaining yourself unnecessarily, something remarkable begins to happen. Your mind becomes quieter. You waste less energy defending your identity and invest more energy developing it. You become less concerned with appearances and more committed to substance. Toxic people notice this change immediately because they can no longer pull you into their endless games of justification. They are left with nothing to argue against except your calm presence, and that is a battle they cannot win. Never forget that your peace does not require another person's permission to exist. When you no longer feel compelled to react immediately or explain yourself endlessly, you begin to develop something far more valuable than a clever personality. You develop emotional consistency. This is one of the rarest qualities in today's world because most people allow their mood to be determined by whatever happens around them. If someone praises them, they feel powerful. If someone criticizes them, they feel broken. Their emotional state rises and falls according to circumstances they cannot control. Toxic people notice these patterns very quickly. Long before they manipulate your words, they study your emotions. They observe what makes you angry, what makes you insecure, what makes you desperate for approval, and what causes you to lose your composure. They are not always doing this consciously. Some have repeated these behaviors for so long that manipulation has become second nature. They instinctively search for emotional buttons because they know that once they find one, they can predict your behavior. Think about how easy it is to guide someone whose reactions are always the same. If every criticism makes you defensive, people will criticize you whenever they want control. If every rejection makes you chase harder, they will continue withdrawing because they know you will follow. If every insult leads to an argument, they only need to insult you whenever they wish to steal your peace. Your reactions become a map that others can read. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine becoming so inwardly stable that your response cannot be predicted by your emotions, but only by your principles. Someone insults you, yet you remain composed. Someone praises you, yet you remain humble. Someone ignores you, yet your sense of worth does not change. Someone attempts to provoke you, yet your breathing remains steady and your mind remains clear. Suddenly, the map disappears. Those who once believed they understood you no longer know how to move you. This kind of calmness should never be confused with emotional suppression. Many people hide their emotions until they eventually explode. That is not mastery, that is delayed chaos. True calmness comes from understanding your emotions without allowing them to become your master. You acknowledge anger without becoming an angry person. You experience disappointment without allowing it to poison your character. You feel hurt without letting that hurt dictate your actions. There is great power in becoming predictable in your values rather than predictable in your reactions. Let people know that your honesty does not change when you are under pressure. Let them know your kindness does not disappear because someone else behaves poorly. Let them know your discipline remains the same, whether life is easy or difficult. This consistency creates trust among healthy people and discomfort among toxic people. Honest individuals feel safe around emotional stability. Manipulative individuals feel threatened by it because instability is the environment in which they thrive. Every morning offers an opportunity to strengthen this discipline. Before the world has a chance to influence your mood, remind yourself that your peace belongs to you. It is not a reward for having a perfect day. It is a decision. Throughout the day, you will encounter difficult personalities, unexpected setbacks, and moments of frustration. None of these are the true test. The real test is whether you can remain the same person regardless of what appears before you. Do not measure your progress by how many peaceful days you experience. Measure it by how peacefully you handle difficult days. Anyone can appear calm when everything goes according to plan. Inner strength reveals itself only when life refuses to follow your expectations. That is when your discipline becomes visible, not only to others, but to yourself. The calm mind is the one place manipulation cannot enter. When your emotions become steady, another transformation begins to take place. You no longer feel the need to convince people to respect you. Instead, you quietly teach them how to treat you through your actions. This is the true nature of boundaries. Many people believe boundaries are long speeches, repeated warnings, or dramatic declarations about what they will no longer tolerate. But words alone rarely change behavior. A boundary is not something you announce. It is something you consistently live. Consider how often people say, "This is the last time," only to give another chance, then another, and another after that. Every empty warning weakens your credibility. Toxic people notice this immediately. They begin to understand that your words carry little weight because they are not followed by action. Soon they stop listening altogether, not because they are stronger than you, but because they have learned that your limits are negotiable. There is an important lesson hidden here. People rarely respect the boundaries you merely describe. They respect the boundaries you are willing to uphold. This is why silence can become more powerful than argument. Instead of trying to force someone to change, you quietly change your own behavior. You reduce your availability. You stop participating in conversations that lead nowhere. You no longer reward disrespect with your time, your attention, or your emotional energy. Notice that none of this requires anger. In fact, anger often weakens boundaries because it keeps you emotionally connected to the very behavior you are trying to escape. A calm boundary sends a completely different message. It says, "I have already made my decision. I do not need to persuade you. I simply need to live according to it." There is tremendous strength in that kind of certainty. Many people fear setting boundaries because they confuse kindness with self-sacrifice. They worry that saying no will make them selfish, unloving, or difficult. But kindness without wisdom becomes permission for exploitation. Compassion should never require the abandonment of self-respect. You can care deeply about another person while refusing to participate in patterns that damage your peace. In fact, sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is allow people to experience the consequences of their own behavior instead of protecting them from it. Imagine a garden. If you never build a fence, you cannot be surprised when people wander through it carelessly. The fence is not built because you hate those outside. It is built because you value what grows within. Your mind is no different. Your energy, your time, your attention, and your peace are among the most valuable things you possess. If you leave them unprotected, someone will eventually treat them as if they have no value. But when you guard them with quiet discipline, people begin to recognize that access to your life is a privilege, not an entitlement. Healthy people will not resent your boundaries. They may need time to adjust, but they will respect your honesty because they also understand the importance of mutual respect. Toxic people, however, often become uncomfortable the moment you stop allowing behaviors that once benefited them. Do not mistake their discomfort for evidence that you are doing something wrong. Very often, it is evidence that your boundary is finally working. There will also be moments when maintaining a boundary feels lonely. You may lose relationships that you hoped would improve. You may be misunderstood by people who only appreciated you when you were endlessly available. Let those moments strengthen your resolve rather than weaken it. It is better to stand alone with dignity than to remain surrounded by people who only value you when you abandon yourself. Remember, every time you honor your own boundary, you quietly strengthen your own character. You teach yourself that your values are not dependent on another person's approval. You become someone whose actions and words finally speak the same language. That kind of integrity creates a presence that cannot be manipulated because it cannot be negotiated. The strongest boundary is the one that never needs to be repeated. Once your boundaries become clear, something deeper begins to change within you. You stop measuring your worth by how many people approve of you. This may sound simple, but it is one of the greatest acts of inner freedom. Many people spend their entire lives chasing acceptance without ever realizing that the chase itself has become a prison. They adjust their personality to fit every room, soften their opinions to avoid disagreement, and sacrifice their own peace so that others will continue to like them. In doing so, they slowly lose the one relationship that matters most, the relationship with themselves. Toxic people recognize this hunger for approval almost immediately. They know that if your greatest fear is being disliked, they already possess influence over your choices. They can threaten to withdraw affection, give you the silent treatment, criticize you in front of others, or make you feel excluded. They understand that someone who depends on external validation will eventually abandon their own values to keep the peace. But there comes a moment in a person's journey when something shifts. You begin to understand that being liked is not the same as being respected. Someone may smile at you while quietly taking advantage of your kindness. Someone may praise you today and betray you tomorrow. Approval is often temporary because it is tied to expectations. The moment you stop giving people what they want, their opinion of you may change. If your identity depends on their approval, then your peace disappears with it. Ask yourself this question: how many decisions in your life have been made simply to avoid disappointing someone else? How many times have you said yes when your heart was saying no? How many opportunities have you missed because you were afraid of being judged? These are not small moments. They slowly shape the direction of your entire life. The desire to be accepted is natural. Every human being wants to belong, but belonging should never require pretending to be someone you are not. If people only appreciate the version of you that constantly sacrifices, apologizes, or remains silent about what truly matters, then they do not know the real you. They know the version you created to earn their approval. Freedom begins when you become willing to disappoint others rather than betray yourself. This does not mean becoming rude, arrogant, or indifferent. It means making peace with the reality that not everyone will understand your choices, and that is perfectly acceptable. You do not need universal agreement to live an honorable life. You only need the courage to remain aligned with your principles. There is a quiet confidence that emerges when you stop seeking validation. You walk differently. You speak with greater clarity. You no longer overthink every conversation, wondering whether someone liked what you said. You stop chasing people who consistently show you they do not value your presence. Instead, you invest your energy where there is mutual respect, honesty, and genuine appreciation. Ironically, this is often when respect begins to grow naturally. People sense when someone is no longer desperate for acceptance. They notice the calm certainty, the absence of neediness, and the quiet dignity that comes from self-respect. Even toxic individuals feel this change. The tactics that once controlled you lose their power because they no longer have access to your deepest fear. They cannot manipulate someone who is no longer terrified of being misunderstood, rejected, or disliked. Remember, your worth has never increased because someone applauded you, and it has never decreased because someone rejected you. Your value is not determined by the opinions of those who see only fragments of your story. It is revealed through the integrity with which you live each day. When you no longer need everyone's approval, no one can use it against you. Panther, when you stop seeking approval, a surprising amount of energy returns to you. The energy that was once spent defending yourself, explaining yourself, and trying to be accepted becomes available for something far more meaningful, your own growth. This is where many people make a critical mistake. After being hurt by toxic individuals, they become consumed with the idea of revenge. They want the other person to feel the same pain. They want justice, recognition, or an apology that finally validates their suffering. But revenge has a hidden cost. It keeps your attention tied to the very person who wounded you. Think about it carefully. The mind can only focus deeply on a few things at a time. If your thoughts are constantly occupied with proving someone wrong, exposing them, or waiting for them to regret losing you, then your future is still being shaped by your past. The toxic person may no longer be physically present in your life, yet they continue to occupy your inner world. That is not freedom. It is simply a different form of attachment. True power appears when your focus shifts from how do I make them suffer to how do I become stronger, wiser, and more peaceful. The moment this question becomes more important, everything begins to change. You start waking up with a purpose that has nothing to do with them. You invest in your health, your discipline, your work, your relationships, and your inner life. You begin building a future instead of replaying a wound. Toxic people often expect conflict because conflict keeps them emotionally connected to you. They know how to fight, argue, manipulate, and create drama. What they struggle to understand is quiet growth. They do not know what to do when the person they once controlled becomes deeply focused on self-improvement. Your silence becomes confusing because it is no longer empty. It is filled with direction. Consider a tree that has been damaged by a storm. It does not spend its days trying to punish the wind. It sends its roots deeper into the ground. It becomes stronger from within. Human beings are no different. Pain can either make you bitter or make you deeper. The choice is determined by where you place your attention. This does not mean pretending that hurt never happened. Acknowledge it honestly. Learn from it. Let it teach you discernment, boundaries, and self-respect. But do not build your identity around being wounded. The world has enough people whose entire personality is a reaction to what someone did to them. Become someone whose character is built from what they chose to become afterward. There is also a quiet dignity in allowing your life to speak for itself. You do not need to announce your healing. You do not need to advertise your progress. The healthiest transformations are often the least noisy. One day, people simply notice that you are calmer, clearer, more disciplined, and less available for chaos. They notice that situations which once drained you no longer have the same effect. They notice that you have become difficult to provoke. And this is what truly unsettles toxic individuals. Not your anger, not your revenge, not your attempts to prove your worth. What unsettles them is realizing that you have outgrown the role they expected you to play. They can no longer pull you back into old patterns because your attention is now invested in becoming someone they cannot emotionally control. Never underestimate the power of a life that is quietly moving forward. While others are fighting battles of ego, you are building strength, peace, and clarity. One path creates temporary satisfaction. The other creates lasting freedom. The greatest revenge is becoming someone who no longer needs revenge at all.